Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial by Code by the Grace. If you're here, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It encourages me to make more videos to help people to understand the basics of some programming languages. In this case, we are learning Kotlin. Okay, so in this tutorial, we will be looking at state management in Jetpack Compose Android Studio. Okay, states are quite important in app development these days. State is any data that changes and updates the UI. So managing it well is quite important because it ensures that the UI stays in sync with the latest data, making it dynamic and also responsive to user directions. Okay, so what are some of the examples of states that we have in app development? I mean, we have text input when a user is typing into a text field, toggle switches, item lists, checkboxes, radio buttons, counters, which are increasing and decreasing, which is actually going to be one of the examples that we are actually going to do in this video. Okay, I'm going to try my best to try and help you to understand states. Okay, so in states we have predominantly three different states. We have the local state, we have the view model state, and then we have state hoisting. Probably said that funny there, but that's how it sounds like. So when it comes to the local state, think of the local state as a local variable. Okay, so what is the local variable? A local variable is a variable that is created in a function, and only that function has access to that variable. Only elements or properties or fields in that particular function has access to that variable. So that's what we refer to as a local variable. So when we talk about states, think of states as local states as the state is only accessible within a single component, within that particular component, and no one else have access to that state. Then when we talk about global variables are variables that can be accessed by any other functions or any other properties on that particular file that we're using. So the best way I always describe it is, think of it, the difference between global variable and local variable is, let's say for example, I order food from KFC, or I order food from McDonald's or anywhere people order food. When the delivery man brings my food, they deliver my food to my room directly. Now, when the food enters into my room and I lock my door, that food is only accessible by me because that food belongs to me. That is what we call as a local variable, because only I have access to that food. Now, if that food was given, let's say for example, the delivery man was being lazy and then decides not to actually deliver the food to my room, but decides to leave it in the kitchen where everyone passes by and everyone can have access to my food. Everyone can make changes to my food. Everybody can take some of my food. People can add stuff to my food. That is what we call a global variable, because everybody else in the house has access to that particular food. Okay, so that's the difference between a global variable and a local variable. Now, when it comes to states, local variable is local states, and state hoisting is kind of like global variable, where we pass in a parent state, or we lift a state to a parent composable for better reusability, and also allowing child components to have access to it, similar to the global variable that I just explained. We are not really going to look at view model states in this tutorial, so I'm not going to really talk much about it, but later tutorials we might have to look at it when we start doing databases. Okay, so when it comes to local variables, or when it comes to states in general, there are different functions that we use to help us to be able to manage the kind of states that we're using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple click tracker right, which we're going to use to test these functions that are available for us to work with our states. So I'm going to create a composable function. If you just happen to stumble across my video, please like and share so that we'll be able to do more videos. But if you happen to stumble here and it's your first time, I would advise you to try watch my previous videos. I think that previous video will be able to help you in learning the basics of Kotlin. I've got quite a number of videos that are coming up. Okay, so what we have here is a function called click tracker. Right now, click tracker is a function that we are going to use to increment. Okay, when we click on a button, we're going to increment. So, but the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a variable called clicks, and I'm going to make it a mutable state of. So that mutable state of is what we use to actually keep, to help us to change the state. So if that state changes, then the UI also updates accordingly. Okay. Now I'm going to have to suppress it because we are not introducing something that we're supposed to introduce, just so that you can see the reason why we need to use some of these functions. So I'm going to suppress it now. And then once I have done this, the next part of it is what I'm going to do is just going to use a column. Okay, I'm going to use a column, and then I'm just going to centralize my elements that I'm going to be using, or composable UI functions. So modifier dot fill max size, and then I'm going to do horizontal alignment equals alignment dot center horizontally, and then we're also going to do vertical alignment equals arrangement dot center. And then in my column, I'm going to add a text there. Text equals count, and then I'm gonna have count dot value in there. No, clicks. I'm using clicks, and then I'm going to. In Kotlin, you don't have to use a semicolon, but because I also write in Java, I like to keep that syntax sometimes, so that when I go to Java, I don't forget. So in case you do see me use some semicolons, that's the reason why. So we have clicks dot value plus, which is when the button is clicked, we want to increase the value that is inside our mutable state of. And then text is going to be increase. Okay. Now that is a simple click tracker composable function. Okay. Now I am going to call click tracker in my set content. Okay. And I'm going to run this. Okay, great. Just run it now. Now, if I click on a button, we should have an increase in our count. When I click on it, nothing is happening because when it comes to the mutable state, even though when you click on a button, it increases the state, it doesn't actually, the screen actually doesn't retain the current state, the current value that we have in our state. So hence why when it comes to state now, we have something called remember. What remember does is that remember remembers the value that you had before the UI updated. Okay, so even though the state has changed, the UI is updated, it doesn't actually keep a record of that. By using remember, we are able to keep a record of the state that we had when the UI updates. So in this particular example, the way to get over this is by using by remember. Okay, just have to add remember to this, and then there we go. So we have this remember, and then when we use this remember, we don't actually need to use value. I mean, there's another way you can use remember, but I don't like to use the value, so I'm going to take off this value because it's simpler that way for me. And then with this code, what's happening is that when the state changes and the UI updates accordingly, we keep a record. We remember what we had in the state before. So remember and mutable state of kind of works together in order for us to be able to see or retain the information that we had before the UI updated. And in this case, because I'm using remember, I don't need this. The reason why I had to use that was because it was giving me an error message that, hey, if you're going to use a mutable state of, it works better with some of the functions that we are talking about that works better with states. So if I now restart my application, you would see that once I click on increase, can you see that is now increasing, and it's also remembering the state that we have. So it's quite important to remember that mutable state of, it stores a value that can change, and when it changes, the UI updates automatically. However, without remember, the state resets every single time the UI refreshes. So as you increase it, the state will change, resets every time the UI refreshes. Remember ensures that the state is saved during recomposition, which is like the building of the UI blocks again, preventing it from resetting. So together, they sort of keep the state intact and updates the UI when it's needed. So it's quite important to remember this kind of working together of the remember and the mutable state of. And I'll see you in the next video.